Commander Jin-Ho Park felt the weight of 1,000 stairs as he stood before the massive semicircular chamber of the Galactic Council. The air itself seemed to vibrate with alien energy as representatives from 47 different species filled the towering seats that stretched up into the darkness above. Each delegate booth was specially designed for its occupant, some filled with methane gas for the silicon-based Nexari, others submerged in liquid nitrogen for the ice-dwelling Frostari. The Vextari ambassador rose from his crystalline platform, all four of his muscular arms spreading wide in what Jin-Ho had learned was their version of theatrical dominance. Standing nearly 3 meters tall with skin that shifted between deep purple and electric blue, the creature's voice boomed through the chamber's translation matrix. "So the little primates from the third rock want to play among the stars," the Vextari sneered, his primary arms crossing while his secondary ones gestured mockingly toward the human delegation. "Tell us, Commander Park, what grand fleet will protect your miners in the outer rim? Your chemical rockets that barely crawl between planets?" Beside Jin-Ho, diplomat Hyejin Kim kept her hands clasped firmly behind her back, her knuckles white with restrained anger. She had spent 3 years learning the complex protocols of galactic diplomacy, mastering 17 different greeting customs, and memorizing the cultural taboos of dozens of species. All of that preparation seemed worthless now, as wave after wave of contempt washed over the human delegation. The Korthax Collective's representative began to resonate, its crystalline body pulsing with harmonious tones that served as both speech and expression of emotion. The translations came through as musical chimes. Perhaps the flesh beings should return to their dirt farming. The void between stars is no place for creatures who still burn dead plants for energy. Jin-Ho watched as the massive form of the Drakmor delegate uncoiled from its heated alcove. The reptilian creature's scales gleamed like polished obsidian under the chamber's artificial lighting, each one the size of a human hand. When it spoke, forked tongue flicking between razor-sharp teeth. Even the translation couldn't hide the venom in its words. "The Drakmor Empire has conquered 17 star systems with our plasma destroyers," the creature hissed. "We have turned entire moons into weapons foundries. What have humans accomplished? You barely managed to build a few orbital stations around your own sun." The chamber erupted in what could only be described as cosmic mockery. The gas-based Nathaki created swirling vortexes of colored vapor that served as their laughter. The insectoid Vaxari clicked their mandibles in rhythmic patterns while their compound eyes gleamed with amusement. Even the usually stoic machine intelligence of the cybernetic collective emitted electronic pulses that their translators rendered as sardonic beeps. Commander Park had faced hostile crowds before during his 20 years in Earth's diplomatic course, but this was different. This wasn't just political disagreement or cultural misunderstanding. This was an entire galaxy treating humanity like children who had wandered into an adult conversation. The Zenthari delegate, a being that looked like a walking tree made of living metal, creaked as it leaned forward in its specialized growth chamber. "Humans speak of trade agreements, but what do you offer? Your primitive electronics? Your chemical explosives? We have moved beyond such crude technologies millennia ago." Light years away on Earth, Admiral Seung-Min Lee sat in the underground command center beneath the Korean peninsula, his weathered face illuminated by the blue glow of quantum communication arrays. At 63, he had dedicated his entire adult life to preparing for this moment, though not in the way the aliens imagined. The holographic display showed every gesture, every sneer, every dismissive wave from the Galactic Council. Around him, dozens of technicians monitored communications from across human space, tracking everything from Mars orbital factories to the mining operations in the asteroid belt that the aliens had just mocked. "Sir," Lieutenant So Young Choi whispered, leaning close to avoid the sensitive microphones, "Project Starfire teams are reporting full operational readiness. All 7 vessels are in position and awaiting orders." Admiral Lee's expression never changed as another wave of alien laughter filled the chamber. He had spent 15 years overseeing humanity's greatest secret, watching as Earth's brightest minds worked in hidden facilities scattered across the solar system. The aliens thought humans were still playing with chemical rockets and fusion reactors. They had no idea what Earth scientists had actually been building. "Not yet," the Admiral murmured, his voice barely audible. "Let them have their fun. Let them think we're helpless." On the display, he watched Commander Park bow respectfully to the Galactic Council, despite the continued mockery. The man was playing his role perfectly, maintaining the image of humanity as desperate supplicants begging for scraps from the galactic table. The Vextari ambassador was speaking again, his forearms gesturing grandly as he addressed the assembly. "Perhaps we should establish a protection fee for human vessels entering civilized space. After all, someone must keep the pirates from capturing their slow, primitive ships." More laughter echoed through the chamber. The Admiral's aide shifted, uncomfortably, but Lee remained perfectly still. Each insult, each dismissive gesture was being recorded and broadcast across human space. Every colonist on Mars, every worker in the asteroid belt, every scientist in Earth's orbital laboratories was watching their species being humiliated before the galaxy. That humiliation would soon become humanity's greatest weapon. The darkness. Beyond Neptune held secrets that would shake the foundations of galactic civilization. Chief Engineer Min-Soo Kim floated in his maintenance pod, watching as massive construction mechs put the finishing touches on humanity's most ambitious project. The shipyard itself was a marvel of engineering, hidden in the shadow of Triton where no alien probe would think to look. 15 years of absolute secrecy had created this moment. 15 years of the galaxy's brightest minds working in shifts, living in underground colonies, dedicating their lives to a project that officially didn't exist. The construction facility stretched across 300 kilometers of void, its modular sections connected by transport tubes and energy conduits that pulsed with power drawn directly from controlled fusion reactions. "Stellar compression chamber online," reported technician Yoon Ji-han from her control station deep within the facility's core. Her fingers danced across holographic displays that showed energy readings beyond anything the galaxy had ever recorded. "Fusion core responding within optimal parameters. We're maintaining stable plasma temperatures of 400 million degrees." Min-Soo smiled grimly as he guided his pod toward the crown jewel of human engineering. The Dreadnought Soul's Pride. Hung in the construction bay like a sleeping giant, her 3-kilometer hull gleaming with an inner light that seemed to pulse with captured starfire. Every surface was covered with equations and formulas that represented humanity's greatest breakthrough, mathematical concepts that would drive alien physicists to madness. Where other species built ships to harness energy, humans had learned something far more dangerous. They had discovered how to capture and weaponize the very essence of stars themselves. The technology was so advanced that even Earth's own scientists sometimes struggled to believe what they had created. Captain Dong-Wook Yoon walked the corridors of his ship with the careful steps of a man who understood the awesome power beneath his feet. Each deck housed systems that existed nowhere else in the galaxy. The stellar compression chambers could contain miniature suns, while the quantum resonance arrays could manipulate space-time itself. His crew of 1,200 represented the absolute pinnacle of human achievement. Every officer, every technician, every maintenance worker had been selected from millions of candidates. They had undergone 5 years of specialized training, learning to operate weapons that could crack planets and engines that bent the laws of physics. "Captain," called out Navigation Officer Soo-Jin Park from the bridge, her voice carrying excitement that she struggled to contain. "We're receiving coded transmissions from the other dreadnoughts. All 7 ships report ready for deployment." Through the massive viewports that lined the ship's command section, Captain Yoon could see the rest of humanity's secret fleet. The Busan's Thunder floated majestically to starboard, her weapon arrays glowing with contained stellar energy. Beyond her, the Incheon's Fire ran final systems checks, while her fusion cores hummed with barely restrained power. Each vessel was unique, designed by different teams, but sharing the same revolutionary technology. The Daigu's Might specialized in long-range bombardment, her stellar lances capable of striking targets across entire star systems. The Gwangju's Honor carried experimental shields that could deflect gamma-ray bursts, while the Ulsan's Courage housed manufacturing bays that could construct entire space stations in hours rather than years. Dr. Young-Ho Kim, The project's lead scientist and the man who had first conceived of weaponizing stellar fusion approached the captain with a data pad containing the final test results. His weathered face showed the strain of 15 years, spent pushing the boundaries of human knowledge. Final weapons test confirms our stellar lances can punch through any known shield technology, he reported, his voice filled with quiet satisfaction. We tested against captured samples of Vextari, crystal armor, Drachmor plasma barriers, even theoretical calculations for Korthak's resonance fields. The aliens' energy barriers might as well be tissue paper. The doctor pulled up holographic displays showing the test results. A single shot from Sol's Pride had vaporized a target the size of a space station, leaving nothing but expanding plasma clouds. The weapon didn't just destroy its target, it erased it from existence, converting matter directly into pure energy. Captain Yoon studied the data with the careful attention of a military commander who understood that these weapons would soon be used in actual combat. What about their response time? How quickly can the galaxy's fleets mobilize once they detect our presence? That's the beauty of our stealth systems, Dr. Kim replied, switching to another set of readings. We're not just invisible to their sensors. We exist in a quantum state that makes detection theoretically impossible. They could be looking directly at us and see nothing but empty space. The technology was based on humanity's breakthrough in quantum mechanics, discoveries that had taken Earth scientists beyond anything the galaxy had achieved. While alien races focused on brute force and energy manipulation, humans had learned to work with the fundamental forces that held reality together. Engineering Chief Min-Soo Kim's voice crackled over the ship's communication system. Captain, all systems are showing green across the board. Stellar compression chambers are stable, quantum drives are synchronized, and weapon arrays are fully charged. We could leave Neptune's shadow right now and engage any fleet in the galaxy. Around them, the hidden shipyard buzzed with final preparations. Thousands of technicians ran last-minute diagnostics, while automated systems loaded the ships with supplies for extended campaigns. Each dreadnought carried enough resources to operate independently for years, turning them into self-sufficient weapons platforms that could strike anywhere in galactic space. The moment that humanity had been building toward for 15 years was finally at hand. Soon the galaxy would learn that Earth's apparent weakness had been the greatest deception in cosmic history. The morning sky above New Jeju Colony turned black as death itself descended from the stars. Colony Administrator Na Young-shin was reviewing terraforming reports in her office when the proximity alarms began screaming. Through her window, she watched in horror as 60 massive shapes materialized in the atmosphere, their hulls gleaming like fresh blood under the colony's twin suns. The Drachmor fleet had arrived without warning, their ships emerging from hyperspace with weapons already charging. Each vessel was a work of predatory art, designed to strike fear into the hearts of their enemies. Crimson hulls stretched for kilometers, their surfaces covered in spike-like protrusions that housed particle cannons and plasma mortars. Emergency. Broadcast to all sectors, Na-young shouted into her communicator as the first energy blasts began raining down. This is Colony Administrator Shin. We are under attack by Drachmor forces. All civilians report to emergency shelters immediately. Security, Chief Taijun Lim, burst into the administrative complex as explosions shook the building's foundations. His security uniform was already singed from helping evacuate the outer districts, and his face was grim with the knowledge that their small defense force couldn't possibly stand against such overwhelming odds. Evacuation shuttles launching. He shouted over the roar of destruction. All civilians to the underground shelters. Medical teams prioritize the children and elderly. The Drachmor warships moved with terrifying precision, their formation suggesting years of experience in planetary subjugation. The lead vessels targeted the colony's defensive installations first, their particle beams turning the orbital defense platforms into expanding clouds of molten metal. The terraforming stations that had taken decades to build were reduced to slag in minutes. Above the chaos, Drachmor fighters screamed through the atmosphere like mechanical vultures. Their sleek forms darted between the larger ships, strafing, fleeing civilian transports with bursts of superheated plasma. The colony's small patrol craft tried to intercept them, but they were outgunned and outnumbered 20-1. Colony engineer Hyun-woo Park was helping load civilians onto the last evacuation shuttle when a Drakmor fighter swooped low over the landing pad. The plasma blast that followed turned the shuttle into a fireball, killing 37 people, including an entire family of colonists who had been moments away from safety. They're not trying to conquer us, he realized with growing horror. They're making an example of us. The bombardment continued for 3 hours. When it finally stopped, New Jeju's proud settlements had been reduced to smoking ruins. The Drakmor ground forces that followed were methodical in their cruelty, separating families and herding survivors into containment fields powered by their advanced technology. 8,000 colonists found themselves prisoners of war, including 600 children, whose terrified cries echoed across the devastated landscape. The Drakmor commander, a massive reptilian creature with scales that gleamed like polished obsidian, stood before the captives with obvious satisfaction. "Your species has forgotten its place in the galactic order," the creature hissed through its translator. "We will remind you of the price of defiance." Light years away on Earth, President Mi Young-cho watched the footage in the emergency command bunker, deep beneath Seoul. The holographic displays showed every moment of the attack, every civilian death, every terrified face of the captured colonists. Her hands trembled with rage as she observed the systematic destruction of humanity's first successful colony beyond the solar system. The bunker's walls were lined with communication arrays connecting Earth to every human outpost in known space. Military advisors and cabinet members filled the room, their faces reflecting the same mixture of horror and helplessness that gripped the president. "Madam President," urged Foreign Minister Jae-sung. "Oh," his voice strained with barely controlled panic. "Perhaps we should consider their terms. Our conventional fleet cannot match their numbers. The Drakmor Empire controls 17 star systems and has over 3,000 warships." The president's expression hardened as she studied the tactical displays showing Drakmor fleet positions throughout their territory. Each red dot represented a force capable of destroying entire civilizations, and they were all controlled by creatures who saw humans as nothing more than amusing pets that had forgotten their place. She turned to Admiral Lee, who stood ready, beside a secure communication terminal that connected directly to the galaxy's diplomatic networks. The weathered military commander's face showed no emotion, but his eyes held a cold fire that promised retribution. "Send the message to all Drakmor territories," President Cho commanded, her voice carrying the authority of a woman who had just watched her people suffer beyond imagination. "They have 48 hours to return our people unharmed. Every single colonist must be released and given safe passage back to human space." The Admiral's fingers moved across the communication controls, preparing to broadcast humanity's ultimatum across the galaxy. Every major civilization would receive the message, including the Galactic Council, that had so recently mocked Earth's diplomatic efforts. President Cho paused, knowing that her next words would echo through history and fundamentally change humanity's relationship with the rest of the galaxy. "If they refuse," she continued, her voice dropping to a whisper that somehow carried more menace than any shout, "we will teach the galaxy what human fury truly means. We will show them that our patience was never weakness, but preparation for war." The message went out across the quantum communication networks, reaching every corner of Drakmor space within hours. The response came back with insulting speed, more laughter, more mockery, and a promise to make humanity an example to any other lesser species that dared challenge the established galactic order. The Drakmor High Command found the human ultimatum so amusing that they broadcast it across their entertainment networks, allowing their citizens to laugh at the presumption of a species that couldn't even defend a single colony. They had no idea that their laughter had just sealed their doom. The void around Drakmor Prime had been perfectly empty for eons, just another patch of dark space between the stars. Then reality itself seemed to shudder as 7 impossible shapes materialized from nothingness, their hulls blazing with captured starfire that made the system's red giant sun look pale by comparison. Fleet Admiral Vexthak was reviewing prisoner reports from the human colony raid when his flagship's sensors began screaming warnings. The massive Drakmor commander rose from his command throne, his obsidian scales rippling with confusion as tactical displays showed energy signatures that defied every known law of physics. "Unknown vessels, identify yourselves." His transmission crackled across space with the authority of someone who had crushed 100 worlds. "You are in violation of Drakmor territorial space. Withdraw immediately or face the consequences." Response came not in words but in pure, terrifying action. The lead human Dreadnought, Soul's Pride, began drawing power directly from the system's sun. Energy collectors that spanned kilometers of hull surface channeled raw stellar fusion through crystalline focusing arrays that no alien mind had ever conceived. Captain Dong-wook Yoon stood on his bridge surrounded by his crew, each face reflecting the same cold determination that had driven humanity to this moment. The bridge itself was a marvel of human engineering, its surfaces alive with holographic displays showing every enemy ship in perfect detail. Weapons Officer Ji Hae-kang, the IB, captain's voice cut through the tension like a blade. "Target their flagship. Show them what 15 years of preparation has created." Ji-Hai's fingers danced across controls that managed forces beyond galactic comprehension. "Aye, Captain." Stellar Lance locked on target. Fusion chambers at maximum compression. We're reading 400 million degrees in the primary array. Around them, the bridge crew worked with mechanical precision. Navigation Officer Soo-Jin Park monitored their position relative to the other dreadnoughts, while Engineering Chief Min-ho Choi watched power levels that would have vaporized any conventional spacecraft. Fire. The beam that erupted from Soul's Pride wasn't just energy in any recognizable form. It was concentrated starlight, the very essence of solar fusion compressed and focused into a weapon that could crack moons and boil oceans. The lance of pure stellar fire crossed the void in milliseconds, moving at 90% of light speed. Fleet Admiral Vexithak had exactly enough time to see death approaching before his flagship simply ceased to exist. The kilometer-long battle, cruiser that had terrorized dozens of worlds, didn't explode or burn. It was converted directly into expanding plasma, every atom torn apart and scattered across space. "Target destroyed," Ji-Hai reported, her voice steady despite witnessing destructive power that bordered on the divine. "Second target acquired, Drakmor Heavy Destroyer bearing 27 Mark 8. Across the Drakmor home system, the other human dreadnoughts revealed themselves with displays of firepower that redefined warfare itself. Busan's Thunder, commanded by Captain Seok-jin Moon, carved through 3 Drakmor destroyers with a single, sustained burst. The enemy ships didn't even have time to raise shields before they were reduced to cosmic dust. Incheon's Fire, under the command of Captain Young-suk Lee, targeted the massive orbital defense station that protected Drakmor primes. Primary spaceport. The structure had withstood siege warfare for over 2 centuries, its shields powered by the planet's entire industrial complex. The human stellar lance punched through those defenses like they were soap bubbles, turning the station into an expanding cloud of superheated gas. The Drakmor fleet, numbering over 200 ships and representing the military might of 17 conquered star systems, found themselves facing weapons that operated beyond their understanding. Their particle shields, plasma barriers, and quantum deflectors had been designed to counter every known form of energy weapon in the galaxy. None of them offered even the slightest protection against weaponized stellar fire. Drakmor. Captain Zethmor watched in horror as his destroyer squadron was eliminated by a single shot from the human vessel Daegu's Might. The beam passed through his ship's shields without even slowing down, vaporizing armor that could withstand direct hits from antimatter torpedoes. "How is this possible?" he transmitted to the remaining fleet units. "What kind of weapons are these?" His answer came from Gwangju's Honor as it engaged a formation of Drakmor heavy cruisers. The human dreadnought didn't fire conventional energy blasts. Instead, it projected focused gravity wells that crushed the enemy ships like insects, compressing their hulls until nuclear fusion ignited within their own armor plating. Ulsan's courage demonstrated yet another impossible technology, generating temporal distortion fields that aged enemy vessels by thousands of years in seconds. Drakmor warships that had been cutting-edge technology, moments before crumbled into rust and decay as time itself became a weapon. Within 20 minutes of the engagement's beginning, the mighty Drakmor armada had been reduced to expanding debris, fields and desperate distress signals. Ships that had survived hundreds of battles fled in panic, their crews broadcasting surrender offers that the humans ignored completely. Captain Yoon watched the tactical display as the last enemy vessels jumped to hyperspace, carrying news of humanity's true capabilities to every corner of the galaxy. Around him, his crew maintained their stations with professional calm, as if reducing an entire fleet to cosmic dust was merely another day's work. All targets neutralized, reported Weapons Officer G. Hai. Enemy fleet scattered, Drakmor primes. Orbital defenses have been completely eliminated. The captain nodded, his expression showing no satisfaction despite achieving humanity's greatest military victory. Signal the other dreadnoughts. Prepare to retrieve our people from the planet's surface, and broadcast our message to every Drakmor settlement in this system. The transmission that followed was brief and delivered in perfect Drakmor language. Return our colonists now or watch your homeworld burn like your fleet. The response came within minutes. Complete, unconditional surrender. 3 months had passed since the Drakmor fleet became cosmic dust, and the Galactic Council chambers felt like an entirely different universe. Commander Jin-Ho Park stood in the same spot where he had once endured mockery and contempt, but now the massive amphitheater hummed with nervous energy and barely concealed fear. The towering Vextari ambassador, who had once gestured dismissively with all 4 arms, now kept his limbs carefully folded in a gesture of deep respect. His skin had shifted from its usual electric blue to a pale, submissive purple as he addressed the human delegation. The Vextari Republic humbly requests permission to establish trade routes through human-protected space, he said, his translator carefully modulated to remove any hint of his former arrogance. Our shipyards and manufacturing facilities are at your complete disposal, should humanity require additional vessels or equipment. The crystalline beings of the Korthax Collective resonated with harmonious tones that their translators rendered as eager politeness. The Collective is deeply honored to propose full trade partnerships with Earth. We offer our quantum computation technology and rare mineral extraction techniques as gifts of friendship. Their crystalline forms flickered with what could only be described as anxiety, their usual confident glow replaced by nervous pulsing patterns. The same beings who had once mocked humanity's primitive technology now offered their most advanced secrets without even negotiating terms. President Mi-Young Cho attended the session via quantum hologram from Earth, her image projected with such clarity that she seemed to be sitting in the chamber itself. She watched with quiet satisfaction as species after species approached the human delegation with offers of alliance, trade agreements, and mutual defense pacts. The rescue of New Jeju's colonists had been swift and absolute. Within hours of the Drakmor fleet's destruction, every human prisoner had been released and given luxury transport ships back to human space. The Drakmor survivors had practically begged to return the captives, offering massive reparations and promising never again to threaten human interests. Word of humanity's true capabilities had spread across the galaxy faster than hyperspace travel. Every species with access to quantum communication networks had watched recordings of the battle, seeing their understanding of warfare completely rewritten in 20 minutes of stellar fire. Admiral Seung-Min Lee now commanded the newly established Galactic Defense Initiative, with human dreadnoughts serving as the ultimate peacekeeping force throughout civilized space. Pirate fleets that had terrorized trade routes for centuries simply vanished overnight, their leaders choosing to retire rather than face weapons that could turn their entire armadas into expanding plasma clouds. Several minor wars that had raged for decades ended within days of human intervention. The mere threat of dreadnought deployment was enough to bring warring factions to the negotiating table, desperate to avoid the fate of the Drakmor fleet. Fleet Admiral Dong-Wook Yoon, recently promoted from his position as Captain of Seoul's Pride, now commanded a growing force of stellar-powered vessels. Each new ship bore names honoring Earth's unified spirit and the courage that had brought humanity to this moment. Daegu's might, Gwangju's honor, Ulsan's courage, and a dozen others. Under construction in the expanding shipyards around Neptune, the reptilian Drachmor representative, one of the few survivors of their former military leadership, approached the human delegation with visible trembling. His obsidian scales had lost their former luster, and his forked tongue flicked nervously as he spoke. "The Drachmor remnant offers complete surrender of our remaining military assets," he hissed through his translator. "We pledge to serve as auxiliary forces under human command, hoping to earn forgiveness for our previous misunderstandings." President Cho rose from her holographic seat, her presence commanding absolute attention from every delegate in the Yos chamber. The same beings who had once laughed at humanity's requests now hung on her every word, terrified of saying something that might earn Earth's displeasure. "The galaxy believed we were weak," she began, her voice carrying clearly through the chamber's acoustic systems. "You mistook our patience for frailty, our diplomacy for desperation. You saw our willingness to negotiate as evidence that we had no other options." She gestured toward the massive holographic display that dominated the chamber's center. It showed human dreadnoughts patrolling the major trade routes, their hulls gleaming with barely contained stellar energy. Each vessel was a reminder that humanity now possessed weapons capable of reducing entire star systems to cosmic debris. Today, you know better. You understand that our silence was not weakness, but preparation. Our patience was not fear, but strategy. We spent 15 years building the tools necessary to reshape this galaxy, and we did it while you laughed at our primitive rockets. The chamber fell into absolute silence as the implications of her words sank in. Every species present realized they were witnessing a fundamental shift in galactic power, a moment when the established order crumbled and something entirely new took its place. "Humanity extends its hand in friendship to all peaceful species," President Cho continued, her tone softening slightly. "We seek trade, exploration, and mutual prosperity among the stars, but to those who would prey upon the innocent, who would mock the defenseless, who would attack the peaceful—" She paused, letting her words echo through the chamber as every delegate leaned forward, desperate to hear humanity's terms for this new galactic order. "Remember this day. Remember how our dreadnoughts ignited the stars themselves. Remember that human patience has limits and human fury has no bounds." Light years away, Admiral Lee stood on the observation deck of Soul's Pride, watching Earth's blue marble turn slowly against the infinite backdrop of space. The planet looked so small and fragile from this distance, yet it had just become the undisputed center of galactic civilization. Captain So Young Choi, promoted from her former position as his aide, approached with the day's intelligence reports. Her uniform bore the insignia of the Galactic Defense Initiative, humanity's new role as keeper of interstellar peace. "Sir, 3 more species have requested formal defense treaties," she reported, scanning through diplomatic messages that would have been impossible to imagine just months before. "The Nexari want protection for their methane mining operations. The Frostari are offering us exclusive access to their ice crystal technology, and even the machine intelligences of the Cybernetic Collective are requesting alliance discussions." Admiral Lee nodded, his weathered hands clasped behind his back as he contemplated the view of home. "Good. Perhaps now we can focus on exploration and discovery instead of preparing for warfare. The galaxy is vast, and there are wonders out there that we've barely begun to imagine." He turned slightly, his eyes reflecting the distant glow of stars that no longer seemed impossibly far away. "Though the dreadnoughts will remain ready, should anyone forget the lesson we taught at Drachmor Prime." The stars themselves seemed to pulse in agreement, their ancient light reflecting off the hull of humanity's greatest achievement. Not just weapons of unimaginable power, but the wisdom to use them only in defense of peace, and the protection of those who could not protect themselves. Humanity had not just joined the galactic community, they had fundamentally reshaped it, turning a cosmos ruled by strength and cruelty into one where justice and protection mattered more than size and aggression. The end.